Hey everyone, we are back and you are watching the Food for Thought series with the one and only Dr. MJ, and we are now on the letter V. And who have you selected for the letter V, and what is the quote?
I think we're gonna go with this is kind of like a unknown writer, like another, somebody you've probably not heard of because they're not like everybody I've been sharing like big stars, but her name is Valery Mendes, so we're gonna go for V for Valery.
I've read this book. Yes, I have. I've read this book. Taken it off your shelf, and I've read it in your home.
This book was published in 1995 by Sister Vision Press, which is a press ran by a Black lesbian woman. And they're basically about publishing Black and women of color way back in the day. And I was in the book when I was a 12-year-old, which is why I have it.
That's why I read it.
Right there.
Yes.
And we were being asked about being Black girls in 1995, 1994, what it felt like, what it mean for us. And so this is the first book my words have ever been published in. And as I said, I was 12. And when I got the book sent to me, I devoured it because I was like, ooh. And, at that time, I didn't know I was queer. I don't know, there's a lot of queer content in here, a lot of Black queer content in here, a lot of, on the topic of sex ed, a lot of sexual content. So my 12-year-old self was like, ooh, what is all of this? And a lot of the pieces, it turns out weirdly enough that some of the people in here I ended up meeting because they were based in Toronto. This is one of the reasons I probably moved to Toronto, because I was like, who are all these, we grew up in Vancouver. I'm like, who are all these Black people?
Yeah.
Who are all these Black people writers? And actually
accurate.
More of like that early 90s era, and a bunch of amazing anthologies where people basically self-published their stuff. They're not big name writers, but they're writers. I guess that's our theme today, is you don't have to be a big name to be a writer and for your words to matter to somebody or resonate with somebody. So this resonated with me as a 12-year-old, and it's one of the poems in the book. Is it a poem? I think it's a poem. Maybe it's, as you put it, a run-on sentence. Maybe it's, maybe it's a stream of consciousness.
I already know Valerie is a much better writer, so it is probably a beautiful haiku. Who knows?
She's rhyming and she's just expressing what she feels.
Okay.
The poem is called Subliminal Demise. Okay? Many faces, isolation, isolated by fragile infantile fantasy. Many sleep with eyes open, coping with the pain that stains the brain. Don't recognize my voice, can't see my face. Rapid life pace, feel the blood race, treading water, a tragic existence, physical resistance, fight with spiritual persistence. Emotional prey, emotional play, condone alone the altitude of solitude. Elevation, revelation of the insane truth. Afraid to die, yet afraid to live. Confess the ironic light of knowledge of self. Don't recognize my voice, can't see my face. A case of dysfunctional illusion, fusion of silence and noise, confusion, sweet and sour delusion. Laws of survival resist the self-rival, self-righteous primal desire to see, to flee, to bind, to find, the blind scent of identity. Reality? Reality? Anyway, I memorized that. I remember and I don't even know that I understood it, again, as a kid, but I was really like, oh, there's something here for me to, I could probably relate to it, because probably in many ways as a teenager, I was alienated, as a Black kid in Vancouver in the 90s.
Yeah.
I was reading this and I was thinking, it's not the Lady of Rage, but there's another rapper that has if you ever find this woman's name, I'll be so happy. A Black woman rapper. The video, she's in a straight jacket, and she's basically talking about her craziness, right? And anyway, I don't know why I'm saying that. All I'm saying is many faces, isolation, isolated by fragile infantile fantasy. Many sleep with eyes open, coping with the pain that stains the brain. Don't recognize my voice, can't see my face. Rapid life pace, feel the blood race. Like, I remember this from, 20, 30 years ago, because something in it spoke to me. And that's why I'm sharing it. it's talking about the psychological pain that many of us feel, like that sort of place of being treading water, a tragic existence. So we feel like we're swimming pools, we're trying to stay afloat. Solitude, our insane truth, afraid to die yet afraid to live. So many of these sort of political philosopher types would talk about the word I used, alienation, when you live in a society where you are W.E.B. Du Bois would call it double consciousness, where you're not fully integrated, right? So she's just, I guess, describing that. And again, I didn't understand exactly what I was reading as a teenager, but I could feel it. I felt the vibes. I understood it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on, when they often talk about Black women making history, or just even trying to thrive in spaces and stuff? Oftentimes they say that one of the greatest barriers is that we are almost looked at as, saviors, or we're supposed to be out here saving people all the time. Like, what are your thoughts on that when you kind of think about the hoops and the things that we have to kind of deal with on a day-to-day, if that makes sense?
I have thoughts. They're not coming clearly. The first thing I thought of was Zora Neale Hurston saying, but I'm losing the line, where she basically says something to the effect of, what is that line? Okay, I'll quote my friend Hawa. She's basically always saying, Black women are expected to heal everyone, and show up for everyone, but who shows up for Black women, right? And she wrote a piece called Black Woman, Everyone's Healer. So that's what I think about it, I think, but I'm not sure. And that's maybe why there is, the exhaustion or the split that we feel has to do with not just be able to be ourselves. and be mediocre is another piece.
Oh, that is a line.
Yeah, like
that is a line. We cannot be mediocre.
And fail and be a palm wine drunkard and just be. But it'll bother me that I don't remember that Zora Neale Hurston line. Maybe I'll find it before we finish. But in general, this talks about that, the sort of, so it's a description of self-alienation, or alienation from self. But the book in general was like, it's amazing. And there's just a whole bunch of, many of these people didn't go on to publish anything else ever. But I have such a special place in my heart for these 90s anthologies. And I have a couple more to share. I have there's one called Does Your Mama Know? An anthology of Black lesbian coming out stories. And I think many of the letters I picked are gonna be in these books. There's one called Afriketi, which is another anthology of Black lesbian writing. Like, I really love the 90s. I wish I was 20 in the 90s. I really missed an era.
That would be my question, is which era do you wish that you were most a part of?
I would have said the late 60s or 70s, except for the early 90s was also this extreme, like, I was alive then. I just wasn't big enough to appreciate it. So for politics in general, I'd say 1968. I would have liked to be 20 years old at that year because of all the radical revolutionary things that happened. But for being a Black queer woman, the 90s was like magic, like just the amount of creative output that was not industry. They did it themselves, There was all these kitchen table presses, there was all these magazines, zines, anthologies that they just published to share their own experiences with each other. So luckily somehow I ended up in one of these without knowing that I turned out to be me, or maybe I turned out to be me because I read this,
What is your experience today? Like, what do you feel? How do you feel about the writing that's coming out today? As they would ask a rapper. Usually they ask a rapper, like, what do you think about the rappers today versus the ones from the 90s?
This era, like, I can show you, there's a zine, a magazine there I have called Kinesis, which was a feminist quarterly, like, and we were in that before it became published in this, but there's no, as far as I know, Black queer woman run press in Toronto today, right? Like, they're not making this today. Like, I don't, like, there isn't this, and they're not, these aren't like, so there's academic anthologies and there's some activist anthologies, but they're very driven by, a press might decide, oh, this is a hot topic, like, you know, anti-Black racism is a hot topic, we're going to get together some people. But this is super organic. This is a bunch of people who are like building and organizing in their own communities and like building lives for themselves. And then they wanted to share their poetry, their music. It was the same, you know, Love Jones with the spoken word cafe vibes. Like, they had a community that wasn't commercial. It was just about sharing knowledge, sharing words, sharing stories with each other. So that is not present today. That's why I want to be, that's why I wish I was 20 in the 90s.
Wow. Well, you were present without even knowing you were present, because you were in the book writing the word.
It's like in there.
You see that? All right. Well, we will be right back with our next letter. Thank you so much for tuning in.